Hopefully Corina can join us soon. Corina, are you still on, or did you pop off? Maybe send in another request if you have to, because I tried, Sarah, add, come on, technical difficulties. Okay, so now, there it goes. Now it says it's waiting for you, so you should get something up on your screen. There it goes, it's connecting.
Okay,
there
here we are. Hi!
Hello!
It's so great to meet you.
It is so great to meet you officially, sort of indirectly face to face.
I know.
Over the years, or yeah, easily years now, I initially came across you because I was connected with Jake, who you used to work with. And I started following your Twitter feed, and I'll let you explain a little more about what you do now. But man, you have just blown up doing what you're doing, and I love seeing your passion come through and all of that. And it's really great to actually see you in person.
I know, it's been wonderful. Jake, as he said, like, was the connection point. And once I learned about Rick Schwartz, I just love your science communication and the way that you connect people. Like, you draw me in. Even when you're talking about things that I know about, I'm just hooked. I'm on the edge of my seat. I love it. So I learned so much from you. But yeah, it's been awesome. I'm currently a graduate biology student. Previously, I was a zookeeper at Cleveland Metro Parks Zoo first, and then at Nashville Zoo. And now I am studying birds at Georgia Southern University. Should I go into kind of what I'm doing here?
Absolutely. Cool? But before you completely jump, I do definitely want to hear about that and want everyone to know. But I want anyone who might be my viewer watching this now or watching this later, because it will go on IGTV. You have to find her on Twitter. Her content is on fire. Her studies that she's doing and all her adventures. She takes the phone out there with her, what she's doing. You line your camera up, looking through your binoc or your binocular, one of the two. And it's awesome. What I love about it is I can hear your excitement and passion for what you're looking at and sharing with your audience. So, but yes, go into what is it you're studying exactly? What are you doing?
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. Yeah. If you're on Twitter, join me. I love to share what it is that I'm seeing and doing. But right now I am, so as I said, back in school, and I'm studying a single bird species called the Seaside Sparrow. So when you're doing research, it tends to focus on a very specific species and a very specific question. And so I am specifically looking at nest predation in the Seaside Sparrow. This species is found on the coast, and they live in salt marshes. So I am out there trudging along in the muddy salt marsh in Georgia, on Georgia's coast, looking for as many nests as I can find. This species is in a really specific, kind of weird situation. They nest in the coastal marsh, which is tidal, which means the water, rises and falls twice a day. Right. And sometimes their nests get flooded if the high tide is higher than they expect, and they can lose their offspring, which is sad, but they are adapted to responding to that. So they'll usually build a nest immediately, another nest right away, but they'll build it higher in the grass. But unfortunately, when they do that, they are more visible to predators. The higher they are, the more visible they are. So I'm trying to understand the nest predation side, because as sea level rise kind of kicks up from climate change, they're expected to have more nest flooding events. So I want to understand, what does the predation side look like? What parts of their breeding habitat are more vulnerable to nest predation threat? So I'm out there looking for nests, and I have camera traps and video cameras out there to look at predators, to look at nest predation, and it's all very rewarding, very exciting.
So there was a video I saw you posted, I think yesterday, from your adventures yesterday. There was a nest. You were kind of like, oh, look what I found. Yes. That's the species you're looking for?
That's the species. And it's crazy because it's the most kind of homogenous environment. Looking from the outside in, it's nothing but just grass. You know what I mean? It's all grass. And then their nests are made of grass. And so it's literally looking for hay in a haystack. Right. And it feels like crazy. And every time I find a nest, it feels like a miracle. I have literally no idea how I found this nest, but my entire degree is riding on that. So it's been a journey. It's been good.
Well, I have to say too, it's like that video. You're like, I'm walking along and I saw this clump here, and I'm like, what is she pointing the camera at? And then once the very last reveal, there's eggs in there. I was like, holy cow! So I'm eye for you.
Yeah, I'm trying to develop that eye. It's everything right now.
That's crazy. Well, as you know, probably you've seen some of these and what I'm doing. The idea initially started with the whole Endangered Species Day thing and trying to think of a different way to engage people to talk about animals. And we can talk a lot about conservation. We can talk about endangered species, and those are all very important things and things we'll continue to talk about. But I've kind of taken a different angle, asking people about their most memorable encounter. But before I jump into that, I do want to ask you, because it's kind of a topical question too. We're all dealing with this pandemic and the changes that it's occurred over the last 9 weeks, and now things are kind of changing back a little bit. How has this impacted your studies and what you are trying to do with your, research, or has it at all?
Yeah, so fortunately, rather, it hasn't totally wiped out. Some people's research has shut down completely, and I'm not in that number, thankfully. But what it has done, like usually I operate with like a team of people to help me collect data, because it is like a big undertaking to find all the nests you need, have all the equipment out there, carry the equipment out. And I don't have those people anymore. It's just me now. And I do have a research assistant, but we don't travel together. Usually I'd be living in field housing close to my field site. So I've had to reduce the number of trips I take out to the marsh, because it's 2 hours each way.
Wow.
Every time I go. And so that costs money, it's time. And so I've had to reduce basically the amount of data that I can collect, which is never what you want when you're doing research. You know what I mean? Data is currency,
Yeah.
And so it has put a little bit of a strain on the amount of information I can gather from my efforts this summer, but I'm just grateful that I can still do it, and that I'm still collecting meaningful data, and I am hopeful that it will still turn out to be enough, and we'll be able to see the patterns I'm looking for with this field season.
Wow, that is an impact. I mean, yeah, like you said, the data, that research data, that's kind of your currency. That's your gold for your research. So, man, that's got to be somewhat stressful, I would think.
Yeah. Yes.
Goodness. Well, hopefully you hang in there, and hopefully things come together for you. So now with that too, we'll move into hopefully the more lighthearted, less stressful part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me, because I know you mentioned in the intro here, you worked at a couple different zoos, you study animals now for your schoolwork and everything. What would be, or what is, your most memorable animal encounter?
So my most memorable animal to this day, like, and every time someone asks me about like, what was like your favorite or your most special moment, this is the moment that comes to my mind. So as a keeper, I work with ambassador animals. So instead of specializing in the care of like a specific taxa or like group of animals, you've got like bird keepers or host stock keepers, things like that. I was working with a really wide variety of animals, but my specialty was animal training and conservation education. So I would do lots of shows, lots of animal training, but I was working with anything from invertebrates like spiders and cockroaches all the way up to sloths and leopards and binturongs and things, and everything in between. Birds, my favorite, of course.
Birds.
And so that's kind of where my story started. So typically we have all been like assigned a group of animals that we are the lead trainer for. So we're responsible for setting up a training plan, which is basically your plan for how you plan to have an animal exhibit certain behaviors on cue, how you plan to build trust with the animals, and kind of work everyone else in the team into working with that animal. Well, one day we got a call that an eastern screech owl had been injured. And when it comes to native wildlife, eastern screech owls are from North America, the eastern part of North America. When it comes to injured native wildlife, if they can't be released to the wild, so if their injury is one that prevents them from being able to go back to their natural habitat, there are only two options. Either they are euthanized, or they get placed into an education program in a facility that can care for them. Thankfully, at the National Zoo, we had the capacity to take Rhonda in. So Rhonda, the eastern screech owl, unfortunately, when she was a chick, there was like a massive storm in Nashville, knocked the tree down that she was nesting in. Mm-hmm. Her siblings survived, or they all survived, but her siblings were able to recover and be released, but she suffered an injury to her eye that kind of detached the iris, the colored circle, from the rest of her eye. Wow. And that impacted her depth perception, and owls rely so heavily on their sight to hunt, And so because of that, she could not hunt her own food and therefore couldn't be released. So that's her backstory. We thought she was a man, and her name was originally Ron Burgundy, because she was a red-phased, red-colored eastern screech owl. And then we found out she was female, so she's Rhonda now. But owls are notoriously very difficult to train. Owls that were from the wild, like taken in from the wild, because they are unlike other birds, and they're very hardwired into like kind of instinctual responses. It's very difficult to get them comfortable around people, comfortable in a dynamic environment like a zoo. And everyone in the bird training world kind of knows this, and I didn't realize how difficult it was until I was in the thick of it. So Rhonda, typically when it comes to training an animal, the first step is to build trust. The two kind of tenets of animal training are building trust and having clear communication. And that's actually the tenets of good relationships with people.
It's
too.
funny.
So,
yeah, it's funny how it transcends.
Yeah.
But it's
true. Yeah, I would say animal trainers are probably the best kind of friends. I try to be a good friend. But anyway, the first step is building trust. And that was actually the very hardest step for Rhonda. So what I typically do, and what a lot of people do, is you start by feeding animals their favorite food. So they associate you with like a yummy experience. Food is a very powerful motivator for most things, including humans, right?
Yes.
So that's usually like the first step. She was so afraid of everything around her that she would not eat if anyone was around. And that's like wild animals. If they're uncomfortable around you, they're not going to eat, because that kind of puts them in a vulnerable state. Like they're looking down at their food instead of looking at you. So she wouldn't do it. And so what I ended up having to do was she would be in her house, in her enclosure, and I would sit in there without any food, without anything, just sitting in there so that she would know that I was at least not a threat. So that she would calm down, that she would relax. And one of the things I was looking for is when she's not relaxed, she's like all pinned up, her feathers are flat, her eyes are like this. And when she's relaxed, her feathers are more poofed out. You can kind of tell in her body posture. I sat in her house for probably a total of close to 20 hours in total. I would sit an hour a day just in there looking at her until she relaxed. And then so the next step was trying to get her to eat. So I would come in with a little mouse leg because they are carnivores, so they love eating other animals. So I would come in with a little mouse leg treat and I would put it on her perch that she was sitting on and then sit in her house. I did this for probably another 15 hours, Rick, an hour a day. And then, she would never even look at the food. She would always just have her eyes on me. Then one morning I came in, and before our morning meetings, I went up to her house, cut me a little mouse leg. The mouse is already dead, so there's no worries there for anyone listening along. Got a mouse leg, put it on her perch, and I sat in there. And I was probably in there for about 20 minutes at this point. And then all of a sudden, she never took her eyes off me. She took one step towards the mouse leg. And I was like, I'm like shaking. I'm like thinking about this. Because
that's big.
It's huge, right? Yeah. She took one step towards the mouse leg. And I'm like trying not to scream in my excitement as that would derail the whole operation. And I'm like, this isn't happening, right? She takes another step. And I'm like, I'm tearing up.
I'm tearing up with you right now because I'm excited for you. I can't wait to hear what happens next.
And then, so she takes that second step, turns away, picks up the mouse leg, and comes back to staring at me. And that, I'm like literally shaking. That was the highlight of my career, period, compared to, like, of all the things I've been involved with, that. Because that moment took almost 30 hours of me just sitting in there, first by myself and then with a mouse leg, right? And that moment she decided that she would eat that mouse leg was saying to me that she trusted me enough to eat that mouse leg. You know what I mean? I had done enough work to gain her trust. And that is certainly by far the most I've had to do to gain the trust of any animal. Usually like a banana chip for a parrot is like kind of enough. Oh, you got the banana chips? Cool. For an owl, especially for a small screech owl, that mouse leg, that one time she ate that mouse leg, it was just explosive for me. And then training progressed and more people were able to feed her. She was comfortable working with more people and from there, but that was kind of the first breakthrough moment with Rhonda, the Eastern Screech Owl. So that's
awesome.
Yeah.
That's great. I mean, and you were saying it was about an hour a day, and you're equating that to about 30 to 35 hours. But if people really think about it, a zookeeper's day, they've got a lot of responsibilities, and to dedicate a whole hour to one animal within a day is a lot right there. But now you think about that in days, that's 35 days. You're probably off a couple of days a week. So you're talking almost 2 months worth, a month and a half worth of building that trust and building that rapport just for her to be comfortable enough to go, I'm going to eat this mouse leg, but I'm still watching you. I mean, that's huge. And so I'm assuming from that wonderful pinnacle moment, Rhonda has eventually become, before you left, hopefully, an animal ambassador that was able to come out in the public.
Yeah, she was. And I was able to, before I left, thankfully, I could have her out in the glove in front of a group of people, and she would eat in front of the group of people, which was just, such a distinct difference from when she had first come.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, and as you said, every time I would choose to sit with her for an hour, that would be me not being able to get something else done. And so I would have to ask favors from other people. Hey, can you cover this for me? Can you do this responsibility for me? Or stay a little bit late so that I could do both. And so it is a sacrifice, even just for the normal routine. Yeah. But it was definitely worth it because she's doing so much better. So, and I owe that to not just myself, of course. It took, after she took that first mouse leg, it took everyone putting in work to gain her trust. Granted, it didn't take that much time for everyone, right, thankfully, but everyone had to build a relationship with her, and it was a team effort to get her where she is today.
That's awesome. What a great story. I mean, I was right there with you as you're telling me. Oh, that was so awesome. Been there, done that. Love it. Absolutely love it. And I'm just going to expand a little more for those that are watching. A lot of times I think the general audience goes to a zoological facility and they see the keepers or trainers doing the work that they're doing, and they're like, oh, it's like my dog at home, or like my cat at home. And, I hope through your story, people realize that it's not at all like your pet at home. Domestic animals bred for hundreds of thousands of years to live with humans, versus, like Rhonda there, you're talking about an injured baby in the wild, still needing all that work, even as a youngster, to come around, gain that trust, and to be able to do then what our guest finally sees, the end result of hours, if not days, if not months of relationship building and trust building and conditioning. And that's a great story to really kind of shine a light on the level of work and the passion that animal care staff have for those animals. So thank you for sharing that.
Definitely. And thank you for providing a platform, because I always, one of my biggest drivers for when it comes to conservation in the zoo setting is that a lot of people don't see that behind the scenes work, and it does take a lot of work on the part of the zoo to even make that public, because a lot of it is not easily viewable by the public. But there is so much going on, so much sacrifice being made, time and expertise being put in to conserve everything from the species we see in our own backyards in North America or wherever you are to international species conservation. So there's a lot going on that a lot of people don't know about, but anytime I get to shed light on that is an honor. So thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. So we're almost at our 20-minute mark, but I always like to wrap these up again, based on the fact that this started with Endangered Species Day coming up. It's now past, but I still, especially you, want to ask you, what is your favorite message, or what's your go-to message, or what would be your message today in 2020 as someone who's gone from the zoo world now to your PhD studies? What message would you want to convey to somebody who kind of sees Endangered Species Day as, well, yeah, endangered species, I get it. They're important, but what would you want to convey? What message is important to you to make sure people understand or hear?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest realizations that I've had being a biologist and also just a member of the human community, is that accountability is so important. And no matter where you are, whether you are here, because usually when we think of endangered species, we always think of something around the world. We always think of
far away,
Africa or Asia. You know what I mean? We don't ever think of our home. And wherever you are, whether you are in the US or you're in Africa or Asia, wherever you are, being accountable to the space where you live is a very, very important part of us all contributing to the conservation of endangered species. And so what that looks like tangibly is and this is harder for people who live in the city, and that's where I come from. I'm a city girl. You going outside and taking the time to get to know the space where you live. Look at the trees, look at the birds, look at the bugs, know the species that you're sharing your space with. Then as you make choices every day, choices that definitely impact the world, the physical world around you, you'll be conscious of the ways in which your life impacts those species, and everyone thinking about their impacts. And granted, there's a lot that goes into species conservation, not just everyone doing their own individual work, but legislative decisions, laws, all this plays a part, but our individual lives play a very important role, and the choices we make play a very important role. So get to know your space, be accountable to it, and think about it, because accountability means that that's who you're answering to. Answer to the space around you when you make choices every single day. And that will go a long way when it comes to preserving the species and biodiversity that we have in North America and around the world.
Yeah, good. Very well said. And you kind of reminded me of something, saying, being a city person yourself, I think a lot of times when talking to people, I hear, well, I live in the city, and so they just miss a connection to nature and the wild. And I get that because there doesn't look like there's wild outside your door. But I love to remind people of urban wildlife. And I think we've had a little glimpse of that now increasing, or at least not increasing maybe so much as pulling back the curtain a little because of people staying at home more these last few months has created opportunities for wildlife to spend more time in the open where people can see them in urban settings. And I love the idea that someone who is a city dwelling person can stop and take a moment and start looking around in their environment for cues or clues that there is wildlife that might be active when you're not active, twilight hours, nighttime, but then also, you know, daytime activities such as different bird species that are either migratory birds through cities or even those that are residential. So I appreciate you bringing up that point of being the urban wildlife, the city wildlife.
Absolutely. Yes, indeed. Especially birds. Keep your eyes out for the birds.
Especially birds. Well, again, I want to thank you. And we started at the top of this talking about following you here on Instagram and also on Twitter, but is there anywhere else that we should talk about that people can find you if they want to look for more information about you or the work you're doing?
Well, on both of my Instagram and Twitter, my website is in my bio. And if you want to check out things that I've written or my thoughts, you can definitely go there and take a look.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for taking the time today to join me. I appreciate it. You are so welcome. That was a totally awesome story. I totally loved it. And it's funny because a lot of these I try to prep with getting a picture from somebody that I can share during the live, and you're like, oh, I don't really have one. And so I didn't even know what the story was going to be about. So that was great too. So you had me on the edge of my seat. That was kind of a fun twist for me too.
Good.
All right. Well, you take care. I'm going to go ahead and sign you off before I sign off myself. But again, thank you so much. And anybody who wants to follow Corina, please follow her here on Instagram if you're watching here. If you're active on Twitter or just have an account, you like to keep an eye on things. She's crazy on Twitter. All sorts of great content coming out there. And, just keep up with her work. It's pretty amazing and filled with passion and fun. So I love that part too.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me, Rick.
You are welcome. Take care.
Bye.
Okay, everybody. Well, those of you that stuck around for the whole 20 minutes with Corina, I appreciate it. She's a pretty awesome lady, and I'm glad we could share that story. Her passion for wildlife and for birds is very evident in the work that she does, and I'm glad it shined through so well during this live. Like we talked about during this too, she really brought in that concept of being a city dweller and trying to connect with wildlife. And that's one thing too that sometimes I don't necessarily touch on that much because I live more in a suburban area and I'm not deep in the city, but I know there's millions of people who live in cities. So even if you don't have time to get out into a park, as you walk through your environment, wherever it may be, or if you can get to a park, look around. Even if it's squirrels and birds, watch their behavior, check out what they're doing. Migratory birds also are always fascinating to see. It's fun to kind of check out what's coming through your neighborhood and all that. So I thank Corina very much for bringing that up, as we always want to remain connected to nature and to wildlife. Sometimes we actively have to seek that out. And in part of all the changes we've experienced in these last few months, I know for myself, it's been very easy to get stuck here at home working all day long and then going to making dinner and then going to evening routines and then going to bed and then waking up the next day and doing it all over again and not really thinking about the need to be outside, which is ironic that me, someone who professes that quite a bit, getting outside and getting into nature, sometimes gets so bogged into my own work, I fail to do that too. So I want to stress that right now for anyone and everyone watching. If you have not been outside in the last 24 hours, even if it's just stepping outside your door and getting the sun on your face or the breeze on your face or whatever it may be, make that effort. It is worth it. It means a lot to your personal health and helps us reconnect back to the things that are important, such as wildlife and nature and ourselves too, because we all are a part of that. So with that, I'm going to say thank you everyone for joining me today. Tomorrow, it's kind of interesting out. I think that we had somebody on today who loved birds. She's a bird specialist. She studies birds. Her story was about birds. Tomorrow, I have a gentleman coming on with me who is a friend of mine, and he has this thing about birds from a long time ago. And I'll leave it at that. You'll have to check my stories later to see who exactly I'm talking about. So with that, I wish you a very good day, and I will see you tomorrow. Have a good one, everybody.